We will start with, just to make sure the procedure, we will start with 2 questions from our side, and then we open to the floor, and I see you all know, or yes, you have to raise your hands visibly, and then we will, well, I don't
this
guess...
This is going to be hard.
I don't think that we do have that much time, so sorry for that.
Okay.
So, first of all, you began making films, remarkable films, early on, and... Bitte? Sorry. Please calm down. So, if you want to replace me anything else, please let me know now. So, let's start. You began making remarkable films early on and can already look back on a long career. And what drove you back then? What moved you, and are you now motivated by different forces to make films?
I don't think anything's, honestly, I don't think anything's changed. The same, force of kind of cinematic nature that seized me, and I know seized a lot of my colleagues who make film, make art. Whatever seized me as a little kid is the same feeling I retained all those decades later, and I feel that every time right now. The same level of excitement when I find a book or a script or come up with an original idea that I think could make a good movie. That excitement which basically supersedes everything else happening in my life except perhaps the birth of children. That may be the only thing that would supersede the birth of an idea. So that feeling has remained fresh with me.
And now you, in terms of subject matter, The Fabelmans is your most personal film to date. What moved you to want to tell your own family story? Were there a special trigger for it?
It's really, it's in a way, who's to say what, the timing of something is rarely something that is a conscious decision on my part, on anything. On any choice I make as a director on a film that I intend to direct, the conscious choice of the timing of it is not something I really understand. I just somehow felt in the middle of the pandemic, when I had more time sequestered in my home, in my house, with my family. Thank God my family was with me. But we weren't driving, we weren't going anywhere, and all I could really do was be with my grown kids, who some of them moved back into the house for the pandemic, my wife, and my dog. And I started just basically, that gave me the time to breathe, to take a big deep breath, and to kind of determine if there was one movie I haven't made yet that I would now have the time to make, what would that be? And it was the answer has always been with me all my life. I've always wanted to tell the story of my mother, my father, my sisters, and this kind of an amazing struggle between art and family. And it's just been on my mind all my life, and it's come out in all my films. I mean, all my films really are personal, and many of them are about family. But nothing that is so specific to my own experiences as The Fabelmans. Yeah.
The first question is there.
Hello, Mr. Spielberg, Philipp Teubner, FTV. Congratulations for your Lifetime Achievement Award.
Thank you.
I have to make a confession. When I was 6 years old, I come from East Berlin, E.T. came to cinema. My parents put me to bed and walked to the cinema, and then I secretly followed them in my pyjama to the cinema. So later, many years later, I studied film in the Film University. So what is your opinion about your impact to ongoing filmmakers with your filmography? So what do you think, what your films made with them?
What they meant to them?
And yeah, how you influence them?
It's not something that it's not something I really think about, because I'm so influenced by so many movies from my own predecessors of the generation and several generations before mine. I know what it feels like to be influenced by art, and storytelling. I know how good that feels. And yet when I set out to make a movie, I don't immediately make the movie and then say, I wonder who this is going to influence. I never say those things, even to myself, because I pretty much have been on a bullet train making film after film after film for so many decades. But I think your story is remarkable. Following your parents at 6 years old, something very similar happened to me. When I was I think I was probably 7, 8, 9. When I was 9 years old, I believe. Let me count the years: 4, 6, 7. I was 9 years old. My parents went out to a movie, and they said it was too violent, and they wouldn't take me to it. It was a Western, and we were living in Haddon Heights, New Jersey. They walked to the local cinema, and they went to see John Ford's The Searchers. And they came back, and they wouldn't stop talking about it. So I went the next day. It was on a Saturday. They went Friday night. I went on Saturday. I went into the petty change vase. We had like quarters, and I took out 2 quarters, and I walked all those. I walked a mile and a half, like you, and I saw The Searchers unaccompanied, all by myself, and it was. I probably didn't understand the movie at 7 as well as or 9 or 8. I probably, when I saw the movie multiple times after that, I understood it better. But I know how it feels to be left behind and then realizing that that's a film that I could have used my mom and dad helping to explain it to me as I was watching it. Your mom and dad could have helped you explain that at the beginning, a lot of young kids are afraid of E.T. When E.T. first comes out of the ship, a lot of kids are scared of E.T.'s appearance. Nice to have your parents holding your hand for that. Yeah.
Somewhere there is a question, yeah.
This is Matic Majcen from the daily newspaper Večer in Slovenia. Mr. Spielberg, this film delves into a very personal aspect of your life. Although the subject itself is not very new, like you said before, your films have always been full of broken relationships, failed marriages, and lost children. We saw it even in Sugarland Express and Close Encounters and E.T. and so on. So the question is, did you use those pieces of your own life in your films because it made for great drama in storytelling, or was it because it was some sort of self-therapy that helped you process those events from your own life?
I never think about that as therapy, but when something rings a bell, often the subconscious bell that's being rung are traumatic things that have happened to all of us when we're young people and get a chance to express that trauma through painting or through music or through design or through filmmaking or through writing books or short stories. I mean, all of that comes out in the wash, even if you don't intend it to. And I, obviously, as a child, was very traumatized by the breakup of my family, and I'd be attracted to subjects like an Empire of the Sun of a boy. A war separates a boy from his parents. He spends the entire time in a Japanese internment camp in China. I'm sure had my parents not gotten a divorce, I would not have chosen Empire of the Sun as a film to direct. So I think all of that is part of the gestalt that motivates all of us to make those key decisions about commitment. What do we commit to? And because when I commit to a movie, I'm committing to something, in a sense, for the rest of my life.
Hello, I have a question about your regular director of photography, Janusz Kamiński. This year is the 30th anniversary that you regularly work with him, and I would like to ask you, in the first place, what was the visual trademark from him that was really a standout, and what was that visual trademark also that you decided that you want to would like to work with him up until today? Thank you.
But you're referring to somebody, I didn't understand the question, I'm sorry.
It was about Janusz Kamiński.
Janusz Kamiński?
Yes.
Yes.
So the question was about what was the visual trademark of his that you discovered that made you decide that you would like to work with him ever again up until today.
Okay, thank you. Well, I was looking for a cameraman, a director of photography for Schindler's List, and I hadn't found one. And I happened to be watching a television show, a movie made for television by Diane Keaton, the first movie Diane Keaton ever directed, was a film called Wildflower. And I knew it was on, and I watched it, and I was very impressed with the work of Diane Keaton. I was equally impressed by whoever the cinematographer was. And what impressed me about the cinematography was the audacious use of warm and cool colors in the same shot. He'd have a warm foreground and a very cold background, or he'd have actors in the foreground with very cool light, and yet the sun was warm coming through the windows. And I thought that the kind of just the contrast of his palette, the choice of his palette, amazed me. I didn't meet him yet. I hired him to do a pilot I was going to produce for ABC, and he did the pilot, and the pilot was equally good. Meaning, I wanted to make sure it wasn't a fluke. And then I met him, and the thing that I didn't realize was that his name was Janusz Kamiński, so obviously he was Polish, but was he Polish-American? No, he was born in Poland. And right there in the office, I said, "You want to shoot a film in black and white? Have you ever shot in black and white?" And he said, in Poland, we could only afford black and white in film school. So I've only shot in black and white. So that was a marriage made in movie heaven. And we've worked together ever since 1993 on everything.
Next question is there.
My name is Mahari Sigit, African Refugee News. I came to Europe in the 70s, and I was victim of duel, because I went to a cinema in Italy, very small one, and we were only 2-3 people, because the people go at night in cinema in Italy, and we went there at 3 o'clock because we said, and my God, it was terrible. In the highways, we were always afraid. Move away the car, when you see big truck. That was great. I want to know the influence of the past directors, horror directors, or how much did they influence in your cinema, and how it was for you to work with Truffaut, because I love Truffaut.
Oh, yes. Of course.
And I have a book for you when you go away, okay?
I think that your question about Duel, right, initially, I had never read anything like that before, so the only experience I ever had with Duel was being afraid of those big trucks in my rearview mirror, so I could certainly relate to that. But I didn't really immediately think of another filmmaker that had made a similar film. I certainly, I'm a big fan of the French Wages of Fear, and then Billy Friedkin's subsequent remake of Sorcerer, but this was long before The Sorcerer when I was. Duel was a short story in Playboy magazine written by Richard Matheson that my secretary gave me and said, "You should make this into a movie." She gave it to me, and I read it, and I thought it was extraordinary, and then discovered that they were actually going to shoot it for ABC television as a movie of the week. And I lobbied really hard to get that job because I somehow felt I had an affinity to the subject matter. I don't know why. And I don't even know who influenced me to have affinity with that kind of subject matter. But it was one of the best choices I ever made because it opened up the whole world for me. I began getting offers to direct movies for the first time. So Duel allowed a lot of producers to trust me and offer me their films. So and Truffaut, nobody like him. He was a child at heart, and yet he was, like the title of his film, he was a wild child. And I worked with him 4 months in Mobile, Alabama, and Moorcroft, Wyoming, on Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And some of my reason for making E.T. came from Truffaut, because Truffaut had just made a film called Small Change, and he had the best time working with children. And he said to me, "You have the heart of a child." This is what he said to me in broken English. He said, "You have the heart of a child. You need to make a movie with kids." He said, "Kids." And I never forgot that. And when I came up with the story for E.T., I always remembered that Truffaut was the one that said, "You got to make a picture with kids."
Thank you. There, next question.
Hi, my name is Joshuk from Public Television ZDF Aspekte. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
A couple of years ago, you said you've always wanted to make a movie about your family, but
Yes.
you haven't had the courage to do it.
Yes.
So obviously it was not only about timing, as you mentioned before. What made you courageous, and what kind of role did your mother play in this relationship between, art and family?
Well, my mother played a great deal. My mom, as you know from the movie, the way Michelle Williams very accurately portrayed my mom, she was a very forthright. She celebrated life every day of her life, and my mom really believed in being reactive, and by being reactive, she made a lot of decisions that were reactive decisions, but it's who she was. If she wanted to do something, she did it. If she wanted to jump in the Army Jeep and pile us all in to go look at the stars in the middle of the desert in Arizona, that would be her idea, and we would jump into the Jeep, we'd go see the stars. I mean, and so in a sense, when my mom had this restaurant for all these years before she passed away, she would always say, when are you going to tell our story? My mom used to say, I've given you so much good material. When are you going to use that material? And during the pandemic, that was one of the things that crossed my mind. And I think the pandemic so scared me, the fear of, in the early stages of the pandemic, at the beginning of 2020, in April, when we all sort of went inside, didn't come out for a long time, I started thinking about mortality and aging, and I started thinking about the fact, in a way, the fear I felt about the pandemic gave me the courage to tell my personal story.
Thank you. Over there.
Thank you.
Silke Sullivan from the German press agency. Mr. Spielberg, The Fabelmans is your most personal movie. Are there any movies you have not made that you think you should make? And if so, do you actually working on something already?
I wish. I mean it, I wish. I was so involved with two films back-to-back that were very personal for me in different ways. West Side Story, I wanted to make a musical my entire life. That's the greatest musical ever written for the Broadway stage. I didn't want to do anything. I had developed some original musicals, which I didn't care for. And then The Fabelmans happened quite spontaneously while I was still in post-production on West Side Story. Tony Kushner and I began to write The Fabelmans, and we shot The Fabelmans before West Side Story even came out. So those two films overlapped. Because that was such a time drain, I never had a chance to think about what am I going to do when these two movies are over? And I sit here in front of all of you saying, I don't know what I'm going to do next. I have no idea. And it's kind of a nice feeling, and it's also a horrible feeling. It's nice that I can actually have control of my life again and make my own choices in my real life. But I need to work, and I love to work, and that's the biggest question I'm going to have for the rest of the year, trying to figure this out.
Okay.
Hello, Catalina Ionea, Romanian magazine.
We can't hear you.
Yeah. Hello. Hi, it's me.
While we are working on
Yeah.
that mic, we go there.
Okay.
Hi there. Hello, Mr. Spielberg. This is Mark Harapetian. I'm founder and publisher of my own film and music magazine, Spirit, A Smile in the Storm, since my 16th living year. Before I forget, I should send you greetings from Caroline Goodall. I met her today. She's here. Great woman. So I'm a huge fan of you, but also of Stanley Kubrick. And I know from the Kubrick family, they are friends with me, that you was very close with Stanley. Was there any other project and possibility to do a film beside Artificial Intelligence, which is my all-time favorite Spielberg film? And another question, I'm biographer of Oscar Werner, the Jules and Jim star from Truffaut. Did you ever met him? Maybe it could work that he was acting in your film, I don't know.
Who, Oscar Werner?
Oscar Werner, yeah.
I never met Oscar Werner, much to my regret. I never had the occasion to meet Oscar Werner, who I thought was, my favorite Oscar Werner performance is The Spy Who Came In From the Cold.
Super.
Martin Ritz film with Claire Bloom and with Richard Burton. But Truffaut and I were very close. I knew him from the time I made Raiders. I met him on the Elstree lot when he was preparing The Shining and I was preparing Raiders of the Lost Ark. And we met in I think, November 1979. He invited me to his house for supper that night, and we remained close friends until the day he died. So I'm honored to have known him that time, and the only film we ever discussed doing together was AI, artificial intelligence. But we are mounting a big production with the cooperation of Christian Kubrick and Jan Harlan, we're mounting a large production for HBO based on Stanley's original script, Napoleon. So we are working on Napoleon as a 7-part limited series. Yeah. Thank you.
Hello, second attempt, yes. Hi,
Hello.
Catalina Ioanea, Romanian magazine Conștiința. First of all, Mr. Spielberg, congratulations. You've had an outstanding career, and I was wondering, would you be willing to share with us today, on the day you received the honorary Golden Bear at the Berlinale, what project you found most challenging throughout your career, both physically and mentally? And also, do you have a favorite movie out of all your movies, which are definitely on the list with favorite movies for so many people in the world? Thank you.
Thank you. No, I mean, I know it's a big cliche to say this, and it's not very newsworthy, but my films are like my children. I do not have a favorite. But at the same time, I can't tell you, the hardest film I ever made was Jaws. Der Weißer Hai. That was there you go. That was the hardest film I ever made, physically. And the most emotional movie I ever made for a long time was Schindler's List, but now the most emotional film I was ever involved in was The Fabelmans. Which is very difficult for me because I was telling a story with a lot of funny parts, but with a lot of parts that were very traumatizing, and even in recreating those scenes was very, very hard to relive it. That became maybe emotionally the most involved I was thus far making a film. Thank you.
Yeah, I think.
Kann ich es abgeben? Meine Frage hat sich gerade erledigt. Ich wollte es gleich fragen.
Okay, then pass the mic to the lady behind you.
Hi, Stephen. It's Mateo from Argentina. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
My whole life has been film ever since I have memory. And in the Fabelmans, you show a scene in your life that you talked about, which is your encounter with John Ford. This is in a way my John Ford encounter. So I was wondering, what would you say to a young director?
Well, I'm not going to say get the fuck out of my office. That's the big difference, I think, between me and John Ford. But every other difference stops after that. John Ford is one of the greatest filmmakers on the face of the planet. Always has been, always will be. I've always been a tremendous admirer of his. That scene in The Fabelmans is word for word, to the best of my recollection, what actually happened to me. He said no more or no less than the words he speaks in that film. Because I've been telling the story to friends of mine for so many years, the dialogue is actually closer to my memory when that incident actually happened. So I think that might be the most accurate scene of the movie, word for word anyway. You know, John Ford was a force of nature. He really was. Mm-hmm. And for many, many years, I was really scared by what he said, and embarrassed by what he said, and shamed by what he said. And 20 years later, I realized that what he had actually done was giving me a tremendous gift. He didn't just invite me into his office to let me tell him how much I love movies and how much I love his movies, but he actually gave me some advice that made sense to me. Not in the moment. I was still in high school, actually. I was a junior in high school when I met him. I was actually 16 years old. But that advice he gave me about the horizon was a gift. And it was a gift. He might have done it in a really gruff way, like a really tough headmaster of an all-boys school. But it was something I will always be grateful for.
There is one question.
Hello, Oras Kiraibayev, Esquire, Kazakhstan. Picking up on the topic of this scene with John Ford, David Lynch, now all the young filmmakers know how to make your horizon look interesting. Do you have any other piece of advice of how to make your shot look interesting for all the young filmmakers? Thank you.
Well, you know something, the advice I usually give is not so much about how to make shots interesting, but how to recognize interesting stories and how to tell stories. Because I think filmmakers need, there are so many there are so many opportunities to learn from so many great cineasts working today. I learn actually more from young filmmakers today than I do from some of the older filmmakers that made movies 80, 90, 60 years ago, because some of the new filmmakers today are doing such audacious work. The Daniels, such amazing genius work on Everything Everywhere All at Once, and I'm learning from young filmmakers so much. But one of the things I'm learning is you got to have a good script. I've always said if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage. And I really believe that. And so my advice is to, if you want to be a movie director, first of all, write. And if you don't feel that's your strong suit, meet somebody whose strong suit is storytelling and writing and form a little limited partnership. Because it's the stories, they're going to get an audience to pay attention to you, not the shots.
So sorry, I think this is the moment for me to make myself most unpopular.
No. Wait.
So thank you so much.
That's it? Okay. I'll do a few more.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do.
So good news, we can do some more, he said.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Mr. Spielberg.
Nice to meet you.
This is Carol Guerrero from W Radio. And I would like to know, what does this award mean to you, and how would you describe this moment of your career right now?
Well,
Thank you.
Right now,
yeah,
this right now I'm very happy talking to all of you, and I feel that's an honor to be speaking to all of you because you're interested in talking to me, and so I must have done a couple things right over the last 55 years. But you know, the honor about a Lifetime Achievement Award is just simply it forces me to do something I don't often do, and it forces me to reflect. And reflecting means I'm not moving forward. For me, when I reflect, it means I'm spending too much time in neutral, just remembering. But I think what happened when I lost my dad 3 years ago and I lost my mom today, she died 6 years ago today. My mom, Leah Adler Spielberg Posner. And I think it put me into a reflective mood after Mom passed away. And my father was still living, but that's one of the things, combined with the extra time I had during COVID, to really do an accounting and do look back. So, and then I did look back to try to figure out what story I could tell about my formative years. And that's, in a sense, what a Lifetime Achievement Award does. It makes you, it sends you back into the past, whether you want to go there or not. It makes you very reflective. And to be honored in Berlin, which is one of the most august, festivals in history, is a tremendous high point in my life. This honor. Okay.
First of all, hello. First of all, thank you to choose my question. Thank you. Very, very short explain what it means name Steven Spielberg, because this is not just talented director. Where is this bridge to be talented and after to be great?
Wow.
Thanks.
That's not up to me, thank goodness, because it's, I do what I do. I do what I know how to do. I know what I don't know how to do, which is 99% of everything I wish I could do. And the one thing I do very well, I'm very aware of that, and I sort of stuck with that. But my name, which I did not choose, which I got from my father, which is an Austrian name, which essentially means play town or play mountain. My first production company, when I was 13 years old, I was copying Paramount, and I called it Playmount Productions. And I even had a mountain on it. I was ripping off Paramount. I was like 13. But I think in a way, it's sort of the name is has given me a sense of humor about myself, because it really does mean that the work I do as a filmmaker, if I'm not playing as I'm working, if the play doesn't match the level of the work, then I'm not going to have any fun. And even on films that are very, very difficult in terms of production or emotionally draining because of the subject matter, there's always been a sense of play in my films, which has always allowed me to add humor even to the most miserable moments of the story. And so maybe that's associated somehow with the name that my father gave me. Okay.
So I got the sign. We do have 2 questions left. Hello. One is there, one is there.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Julia Wissmann from Radio 1 public radio station. It's here. Hello, Mr. Spielberg. You earlier talked about Schindler's List. After shooting Schindler's List, you were founding the Shoah Foundation. How important is that for you concerning your lifetime achievement?
Well, the Shoah Foundation has been the greatest social work I've done in terms of consciousness building. I think Schindler's List, kind of imbued in me a responsibility to do something beyond the film, because often films have a very short shelf life in terms of attention, holding the attention of the world. Not all films can do that for very long, but I really found it quite profound to have. I invited some of the survivors of Oskar Schindler's List to come watch us shoot the film, and several of them were asking me to tell their stories, and when a filmmaker hears somebody say, tell my story, I'm thinking they want me to make a movie about their particular story, but no, that's not what they wanted at all. They wanted an outlet to be able to talk about what happened to them, and they wanted to be able to create a memoir of their own experiences, everyone they lost, what they were like growing up in Hungary or Poland or Germany before the war, and then what happened during the Holocaust. And that's what put into my mind to create a foundation where we would send archivists and visual historians all over the world to collect these testimonies. And that became, for me, the most important work that ever came out of a motion picture. And I'm very, very proud of that. And that is something that I'm still very active in. And we are now collecting testimonies all over the world, including, 3rd, 4th generation Armenian testimonies, collecting testimonies in Sarajevo, collecting testimonies in Cambodia, testimonies in Rwanda. So the archive has expanded beyond the Holocaust to other genocides. And Germany was our first, Berlin was our first European headquarters in 1994 for the Shoah Foundation. Bertelsmann financed our entire headquarters here, where we started collecting testimonies all throughout Western Europe.
So, the last question.
Hello, it's a great pleasure having you here, and a great honor. I would like to ask you a short question. How much you think the tensions inside your drama storytelling can be formative, transformed through the power of imagination, and why not love? And also, in which way you made to guide the view of the audience towards the tension between the first and the secondary characters? Thank you so much.
Wow. Okay. How much time? That's a very heady question. That's obviously that's a postgraduate question right now. Well, let me just try to. There's no short answer for that, obviously, because it's a very good question, a very complicated question. But as a filmmaker, I have to think about all of those things. I have to think about, for one thing, every scene I direct, there has to be a reason for the scene. If there's no reason for the scene, you should cut it out and not waste and save some money. And that essentially means that I'm very focused on what is every scene saying, to make a whole based on the sum of many, many disparate, often disparate parts. And so, the primary characters, the secondary characters, there really aren't secondary characters. In every movie, every character makes a contribution to the telling of the story. And so there is no unimportant character in any story at all. And if there are unimportant characters, they shouldn't even be included in the script. And so it's like building a painting. It's like building a picture based on tiles. You know how you tile things, and when you put 1,000 tiles together, they form one face. You've seen those portraitures of people's faces, and if you walk up to the portrait, there's tens of thousands of teeny portraits making up one large face. And that's what a movie really is for me. A movie is the sum of all of the details. And I always say, and I've always said this to young film students, don't sweat the big stuff. That'll take care of itself. But you got to sweat the small stuff. And that, I think, is the best answer I can give you right now to a very good question. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you very much.